Greetings, travelers! Welcome back to Tales from the Enchanted Forest with your hosts, Fox and Sparrow.
Salutations, all. I hope everyone has been doing well as we are coming to the end of the second month of the year. And I just can't believe it. Like, the first couple months of this year have just been rocketing past. Normally, I feel like January and February are like a bit of a slower crawl. Not this year.
I have the opposite experience. I always find that January goes really slow. And then February is like lightning, because I was looking at the calendar. I'm like, okay, so next week will be the last week of February, and I have a bunch of stuff that I have to do by the end of February. And I was like, oh, February is over on Friday.
Yeah,
so this is like the last week.
It's been crazy. I don't know. To me, it's like normally I feel like it's a slow buildup, and then like I get to feel like becomes a jog when like mid-spring comes around, but. No, I feel like this has just been a lot going on, and some of it's been really good, some of it's been just crazy, straight up. But I'm happy to be here in the coziness of the Enchanted Forest, looking at our this week's story we got going on.
Yes, and I was really hoping, if we're on brand, we have to talk about the weather.
Yes, we do.
I was really hoping that I'd have some snow to go with the story of the Snow Queen, but if you are like me, we are enjoying it in 12-degree weather. So I don't need any coziness because the sun is shining.
I will say, at least for us, we have had, I think, record snow and cold this season. So this has actually been perfect for the Snow Queen. It does remind me, like, do you remember the year Frozen came out? Whatever it was, like... Mm-hmm. That year, we also had, like, record snow and cold that year, and I think that also happened for Frozen 2. So there was a joke that was, like, Elsa was bringing the snow. I'm not sure if it happened for Frozen 2, but I definitely know it happened for Frozen 1, so I kind of feel like I've manifested that a bit, because I decided pretty early on this year, before I knew about the snowfall, that we were going to do the Snow Queen. So I feel like I manifested the snow.
I do remember people being like, oh, Disney's working overtime with their marketing budget by bringing the actual snow.
Oh, yes, that was the joke. But yeah, it's all good. So unfortunately, you're chilling with some actually kind of sounds nice weather. I mean, it's too bad this is the type of year for snow, but 12-degree weather is pretty nice, I must say.
I mean, the problem is for January, February, March, and December, I have it earmarked for indoor activities, bad weather outside. So in my head, I'm more productive when it's cold outside because I have to stay inside. Mm-hmm. When it's warm, I feel like I have to go outside and do outdoorsy things, or I have to, be a bit more active and stuff. And so when the weather is nice, it makes me irritated because I'm like, I want to be the indoor part of the year. Mm-hmm. And I hate when we skip that. Because then it feels like it's just warm the entire year round, which is not what I want, especially since I want to go skiing.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's a give or take, I wouldn't mind if the Snow Queen makes a visit to me.
I do hope she kind of makes a visit to you sometime after this, that you can go back to skiing. And so this week, as we've discussed a bit, this week we are concluding the tale of the Snow Queen. And if you haven't already, I would recommend listening to our last episode where we discussed the first 3 stories of this epic tale. Mm-hmm. But even if you want to take the chaotic approach and skip that part 1, there is still plenty to enjoy in this week's episode. And I feel like there's a couple of like stories within stories which you can enjoy as maybe their own little tale. So you're in good company.
Yes, and I think the Snow Queen has 7 parts. So the first 3 are in episode 1, and then the next couple are here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this episode will be covering stories 4 through 7. And without further ado, we'll pick up where we left off in the tale of the Snow Queen. We begin with the 4th story of the Prince and the Princess. While Gerda continued her quest to find Kay, she came across a curious crow who asked Gerda where she was going. She relayed her life story to the bird and asked if he knew where Kay could be. To her relief, the crow said he believed, he knew where Kay was, but told Gerda that he had likely forgotten her, for he was with the princess now. He explained as best he could in her language that there lived a beautiful, clever princess. She wished to marry a man who was as smart as her and confident enough to hold a conversation with her. And so all the handsome and well-spoken men of the kingdom were welcomed to the castle to try and win the princess's favor. Many from all over came, but none lasted long, for they were all stunned by her beauty and too timid to speak to her before all the pompous and grandeur of her royal courts. Many men were turned away, but after 3 days, a cheerful boy with long brown hair, dressed in ragged clothing, approached the castle. Gerda recognized the description and excitedly told the crow that it was indeed Kay. The crow described the backpack he wore, but Gerda corrected him that it must be a sled, for that is what Kay had when he disappeared. The crow nodded and described how he walked in with such confidence even though he was dressed so poorly compared to the silver and gold adornments on the guards and servants that he passed. The halls were filled with important counselors and ambassadors who were all discussing important matters which gave an air of seriousness. But the boy walked through at ease, even though his boots squeaked quite loudly. Gerda said that sounded like Kay, for he had new shoes that would often creak loudly. The crow confirmed that they were very creaky indeed, for he had heard the whole tale from his sweetheart, who was also a crow, and lives near the castle, and this is how he learned of the tale. But what did the princess think of him? Gerda asked. She liked him a great deal, the crow explained. He approached her confidently and had quite a lively conversation, and the boy explained to her that he had not come to woo her, but hear her wisdom. But the two hit it off, and they were both very pleased with each other. Gerda knew this must be Kay and asked the crow's help to see him. He told her that it would not be easy, for the guards would not easily let in strangers into the castle. But he was so moved by her tale that he and his sweetheart agreed to help sneak her in. Quite the Ocean's 11 crew we got here. Little girl with nothing but a chip on her shoulder and 2 crows.
The crow and his sweetheart. She's like, I'll help you, but only because my man asked me to.
She's probably going in there to get more gossip. Like, she's over
well,
her.
I like how gossipy this crow is. I wish birds were like that in real life and not just terrifying.
Yeah, like, he's just so excited to dish all that he heard from his sweetheart. And in the actual story, he keeps bringing it up. Like, he keeps mentioning it. Like, he's like, and I heard this from my sweetheart, who I love so much.
Oh, just so you don't get the wrong idea, lady, I'm taken.
But then eventually he does get to the part where he's describing the princess, and she's like, oh, and she's also very beautiful, but I am taken by my sweetheart. So, you know, I can't make a move, but I love my sweetheart and she's amazing. It's like, okay, now you're getting weird, bro.
You know how we know this is a fairy tale? Because a guy has actual gossip they've retained. Although I will give him credit, it's his girlfriend, his sweetheart, that's telling him the information. That's how he knows. But if you ever ask a man for gossip, the information they give you back is just, it's like, oh, why'd they break up? I'm not sure, I didn't ask. Oh, what's going on with your friends? They're fine. Like, okay, but where's the tea?
This just feels like the true love story of this, like, Snow Queen is just that this crow retaining the information his sweetheart told him and then excitedly passing it on to the next person, being like, yes, this is what she's excited about, and I'm now excited about it.
Me and my girlfriend were talking, and she told me all this information.
Here's the tea. Oh my goodness. So, using the crow's wits and the sweetheart's knowledge of the castle, they snuck her in the back and all the way to the prince's bedroom. Once she got there, she excitedly called out Kay's name, but when the boy sat up, it became clear that this was not Kay. Rather, he was just another boy who looked like him. And I really like this part because there's clearly parts leading up to this moment where he's telling her something and Gerda is just inserting, oh, no, this is what you actually meant. Like, that's not K. Like, she's inserting her own information to make it more K. And it's actually, if you, like, go back through the text, there's 3, like, separate instances where he tells her one thing, she corrects him, and he's like, okay, well, it must be true. Like, you've got your tea, I've got mine. I'm trying to dish you. So it's not, at least to the audience, it's not a huge shocker at this point that this is not K. But Gerda just wants it to be.
It's a bit of a confirmation bias.
Exactly. But anyway, so I find it really interesting and kind of a little cute little acknowledgement that, you know, she's still just a kid. She's still just very much looking for her playmate, but having some rotten luck right now.
She's doing her best.
We're very proud of our girl. Gerda began to cry, and the princess, who awoke from the commotion, came into the room to find out what was going on. Gerda and the crows explained the situation to the prince and princess, and they were very moved by Gerda's story. And they praised the crows for trying to help. But they also warned them never to let it happen again. Don't worry, though. The crows were not punished. Rather, they were given the position of court crows, which they gladly accepted. Wish that always happened. You did something wrong. Don't do it again, but here is a big reward. That night, Gerda slept in the castle and rested for the first time in a while. But the next day, she begged the royal couple for a simple pair of boots before she went on her way. Remember, she had lost her new red shoes in the garden last time, so she's been running barefooted. They gladly gave her the boots, but they didn't stop there. They also gave her a small golden carriage, a horse to draw it, a bunch of fine food for the road, luxurious clothes, and a muff to keep her warm. She thanked them very much for their kindness before saying goodbye and returning to her journey to find Kay. And that brings us to the end of part 4. It's a bit of a filler episode in the grand scheme of things, but I like this idea of, like, fairy tales bumping into each other. Like, this prince and princess have clearly gone on their own fairy tale journey, and, like, they're starting to enjoy their happily ever after, but they have just collided with Gerda and her tale.
Taleception.
Exactly. The 5th story is of the little robber girl. We flash forward a bit later in the journey. Gerda is in her gold carriage making its way through a forest trail, when suddenly Gerda heard the sound of an arrow flying through the air, and it finding purchase in the driver's neck, which was quickly followed by his screams. Soon after, the footmen also fell, and the horse cried out in distress. Before she knew what was happening, Gerda was pulled out of the carriage by an old robber woman. The old woman had wild eyes, and Gerda thought that she may very well eat her. And she might have, if her daughter hadn't startled her by biting her ear. Letting out a cry of pain, the old woman released Gerda. The little robber girl declared that Gerda would be her playmate, and she bit her mother again for good measure, which got a laugh out of the rest of the robbers. The 2 girls got into the carriage and talked as the robbers rode it back to their hideout. On the way, the little robber girl took Gerda's muff, and Gerda told her the story of how she was looking for Kay. I do love this, like, repeated thing of just Gerda meets someone and then just immediately unloads her whole life story to the person without questioning.
This is who I am.
I feel like if you did that to anyone on, like, a normal day, they would just be so, like, disturbed by it. Like, why are you telling me all this? Like, please stop.
Keep that to yourself.
Yes. Hearing the tale, the little robber girl assured her that none of the other robbers would kill her, even if she got angry at her, for she would certainly do it herself. And with that comforting thought, they arrived at the thieves' hideout, which was an old abandoned castle. You shall sleep with me and my animals tonight, the little robber girl told Gerda as they made their way to the corner of the main hall. There were 100 pigeons there on various perches. The little girl grabbed the nearest one and shoved it in Gerda's face, demanding she kissed it. She laughed at Gerda's discomfort before turning her attention to the 2 caged wood pigeons and the tied-up reindeer. Holding a knife to the throat of the reindeer, she explained that these creatures would run away if they weren't tied down. The reindeer tries to kick away from the knife, but the little girl just laughs at his fear. Releasing the animal, she sits down and wraps her arm around Gerda's neck and demands she tell her tale again. Nervously, she tells her story once more, and slowly the little robber girl falls asleep, though never losing her grip on Gerda or her knife. The wood pigeons cooed to Gerda and told her that they had seen Kay. He was in the carriage of the Snow Queen, which drove by their nest in the woods. The cold blast from their carriage blew upon them and killed all of them except for the two of them there. Then the reindeer chimed in and told her that the Snow Queen was likely traveling to Lapland, as there was always snow and ice in the land. He even heard that she had a summer tent there, while her main castle was at the North Pole on the island of Spitsbergen. So, a couple things to mention here. I'm not sure if you knew this, or I didn't know this when I first read the story. Maybe you knew, Fox, that Lapland is a region in Finland. It's like the northern part of it. So I know when I first read this, like a long time ago, when they just said Lapland, I was like, the mythical land of Lapland. That's not a real place. Looking it up, I'm like, oh no, this is Finland.
I have heard of Lapland, but only because I live in Europe.
That's fair.
I don't think I knew before that.
Me from North America was just like, that sounds like a different place.
It's like, that sounds made up.
But also, it's just a region in Finland. It sounds like it should be its own place, because later on they will mention Finland as if it's different, but Lapland will be different. I never got to fully understand that one. The next morning, Gerda told the robber girl all that the animals had said to her. After more waving of her knife and interrogating of the poor reindeer, she decided to help. They waited until the afternoon when the men had gone out and the little robber girl's mother was sleeping after a few drinks. She untied the reindeer and told him to take little Gerda to Lapland so that she may be reunited with Kay once more. She helped Gerda get on the reindeer's back and even packed food for her journey. She returned the warm boots, but would not return the muff, for the little robber girl found it too pretty to give up. So she gave Gerda her mother's old mittens instead. And with that, the reindeer took off into the forest, past the howling wolves, and into the snowy fields of Lapland. And that concludes the 5th story of the robber girl. Just like a mini jump into like a bit of a horror story. Like, I don't know. She seems very creepy to me. Maybe that's just me.
I don't find it too creepy. It does seem more of like a grim kind of story, like the little robber girl.
Mm-hmm.
It seems more like it's grim-esque.
Yeah, grim's probably a better term. Like, it does start off with the carriage getting ambushed and like brutally people are taken out. And then it does do a lot of talking about how she's, like, mistreating the animals and stuff and kind of, like, just enjoys the fear that comes from them.
Yeah, and I think it comes from, it feels like it's more like a Grimm Brothers fairy tale. But Hans Christian Andersen did write The Little Mermaid, which does have a really weird ending as well. So I guess it won't really be fair to say, oh, this sounds like something the Brothers Grimm would write. Or collect, as opposed to something that Andersen would write, since he also writes really weird things.
Yeah.
But maybe the crows were too positive, and he's like, I need to balance it out with the weird little robber girl.
I mean, fair enough. It just is a very different energy from the rest of the story we've had so far, which has been more of like a sweet fairy tale, I would say, with more mild, like unnerving undertones. It's of that if you like read it or think about it too long. But this one is more like a little more in your face of like, this is maybe not quite right. Something's going on here. But it's a charming addition to this overall epic. And once again, a little bit of a filler, but we kind of get to see more of the trials and tribulations Gerda has to go through to find her friend. So next is the 6th story of the Lapland woman and the Finland woman. After traveling for some time through the snowy fields of Lapland, Gerda and the reindeer came across a small hut. Though it was still very cold inside, an old Lapland woman came out and welcomed them in. The reindeer told his and Gerda's stories, and she was very moved by little Gerda. She told them that they must travel 100 miles further to Finland to find the Snow Queen, but she would give them a note on dried fish skin to bring to a Finnish woman who lives there. She would be able to help them further. After dinner, the pair rode out once more under the glow of the northern lights. Eventually, they reached the hut of the Finland woman. Unlike the Lapland woman's hut, this hut was sweltering hot. Sweating in the heat, they gave the note, and the reindeer once again told both of their tales to the Finnish woman. The woman said nothing, but the reindeer noticed a twinkle in her eye. He recognized that this must be a very powerful woman who could command the wind. So he begged her to give the power of 12 men to Gerda to help defeat the Snow Queen. The woman laughed and said that this wouldn't help her in the slightest. Still, the reindeer begged and begged her to give some of her power to help. Taking the reindeer aside, she told him that she could not give her any greater power than she had already possessed. Surely he must have already seen it, how animals and men are obliged to serve her, and how well she has traveled the world barefooted as she has been. If Gerda's power of innocence and purity of heart cannot remove the shards of glass from Kay, then there is nothing more either of them could do. I do like how they acknowledge here that just innate ability Gerda has to like kind of help persuade like both people and animals to like help her. Like this is a theme we're seeing, and it's not often acknowledged. It's like, oh yeah, they're just the protagonist, but it's like, no, there's a gift here. Let's not kid ourselves.
Like, it's not just that she's the protagonist. There's a bit more to it than that.
Yeah. So I kind of like that acknowledgement here, and just the casualness of she doesn't need anything. Like she's already got what she needs. We just need to get her there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good explanation, because at some point you have to ask, like, is there too much happen chance of, oh, I'm going to do this and then this, and things are going to work out perfectly in my favor. So the acknowledgement that, hey, this isn't just you being really, really good at surviving.
There's something else going on here.
You're also the chosen one.
Oh, yeah, that helps a lot to be the chosen one.
It makes every quest much easier.
Yeah, and then you get to it does lower the stakes at times, but I do love a good chosen one trope. It's always quite amusing to find out. Unless it happens like 5 seconds at the end of the story, then it's not interesting.
Well, I mean, I know people get a lot of flack for writing chosen one stories, but if it's not the chosen one, it's going to be a very frustrating story to read. She would have died of like hypothermia in the first story.
Well, no, I'm very fine with chosen one. I think I've just read 1 or 2 stories where it's like, it's clear that, like, you know, there's no overall magic in the world.
Fantasy books.
But like, I think I've read a couple stories where it's like at the last 5 minutes, like they're like talking to whatever deity in the world, and they're like, yes, you are the chosen one. It's like, we knew that. You saying it now at this moment when it does not matter anymore is uninteresting. If anything, I love when at the beginning of the story they declare this one's the chosen one, and then seeing them have to figure out what the heck that means is more interesting than, by the way, we're tacking this on at the end, you know?
Like the last minute prophecy or something like that.
Yes. A last minute prophecy, a last minute piece of information that doesn't add, and if anything can detract from what's already going on. But I do love me a good chosen one.
Like the big reveal.
Yes. Unless there's been a lot of question about who the chosen one is. I more just don't like last minute information being dropped at the end that seems to come out of nowhere, I think is what I'm realizing. But yes, our chosen one, Gerda, has what she needs. She just needs to get to the Snow Queen. The woman continues to explain that Snow Queen's garden is 2 miles from where they are now. The reindeer must bring Gerda to where the bushes with red berries grow, drop her off, and immediately return to her hut. And in a rush, they take off once more into the snow. Gerda cried out that she had left her boots and mittens behind, but the reindeer dared not stop until they reached the bushes. Once they reached the bushes with red berries, the reindeer did as they instructed and left Gerda all alone. Freezing, Gerda ran forward into the garden but quickly ran into the Snow Queen's snowflake guards. Feeling cold and afraid, she began to repeat the Lord's Prayer. As she did, little angels appeared all around her and they fought off the Snow Queen's guards. With the final obstacle removed, she ventured forth to find Kay. This concludes the 6th story and sets the stage for the final act.
The big climax scene.
Big showdown. This is it. We've been building to this moment. The moment we might see the Snow Queen for more than 3 lines. The 7th and final story of our epic. What happened in the Snow Queen's palace and what happened after that? The Snow Queen's palace was large, and some hallways went on for miles at a time. But for as large as it was also very quiet, with hardly a soul passing through to make sounds of joy and laughter. But the place the Snow Queen enjoyed the most was the frozen lake in the very middle of the palace. The lake was cracked, which left many pieces of ice that were just the right size that one could arrange them to make many words and shapes. At this point, Kay was quite blue with the cold, but he didn't feel it because the Snow Queen had kissed the feeling of cold away. Kay could only focus on using the pieces to create elaborate designs and puzzles. While he believed this to be the highest of importance, he didn't realize that this was the effect of the glass in his eye. He made many words with the pieces of ice, except for the one word he very much wanted to see, which was eternity. The Snow Queen promised that if he could spell the word, he would be his own master, and she would make him a present of the whole world. Plus, she would get him a new pair of skates. The Snow Queen then told Kay that she must go south to bring winter to warmer climates. With the Queen gone, Kay was left all alone in the quiet, still palace. That is until Gerda came barging through. When she saw him, she called his name and ran to hug him. But Kay remained cold and unresponsive in her embrace. Gerda cried and cried, and sure enough, her tears thawed the ice in his heart and removed the wicked glass. Kay finally looked at her, and when she sang the old hymn, he began to cry himself. And as he wept, the grain of glass was removed from his eye. He hugged Gerda back and told her how much he missed her. They laughed with joy, and the little pieces of ice danced about with their joy and laughter. And when they stopped their dance, they made up the pattern of the word the Snow Queen had wanted to see. With the word written and Kay's freedom promised, they left the palace before the Snow Queen returned. The two happily talked away as they reached the bushes with the red berries. The reindeer had returned and was waiting for them with a young doe. The two carried Kay and Gerda to the Finnish woman's hut, where the two warmed up and got some directions. They then stopped at the Lapland woman's house, where they got warmer clothes for the return trip. The reindeer and the doe brought Kay and Gerda to the edge of Lapland before bidding them farewell and wishing them a safe journey. As they continued the trek, they saw the first signs of green in the plants and trees. Eventually, they came across a horse and rider, who Gerda immediately recognized as the horse that once pulled her carriage in The Little Robber Girl. Gerda and the robber girl were delighted to see each other again, but the robber girl wondered aloud if Kay was worth all the effort to save. Before Kay...
She really said him.
She would... I want to pull... Maybe I should pull up the direct quote, but she, straight up was like, I wonder if this guy was worth all the effort you went through. She said,
yeah,
I'm paraphrasing.
That's literally what she says.
Yeah, it's just you know, little Gerda went to so much effort, you better be worth it. Before Kay could retort, she continued to tell him that she got tired of staying at home and was off to travel north. And she also told them that the prince and the princess were now traveling abroad. Gerda asked about her dear crows and how they were doing. Unfortunately, the crow had passed away, leaving his sweetheart behind as a widow. Yeah, the true love story ends in tragedy in this tale, unfortunately, and they do make a note to talk about how sad the sweetheart is about his passing. After catching up some more. The robber girl promised to visit them if she was ever in their town, and then she took off into the wider world. Kay and Gerda continued their journey home until they finally returned to their small little attic apartments. But even as they walked into their homes, they became very aware that they were no longer children. They had grown up during their time away. Even so, they returned to their old spot under the roses, holding hands, singing the old hymns, and enjoying a warm, delightful summer. And that is the tale of the Snow Queen, all 7 parts.
Dun, dun, dun.
So this, as I mentioned earlier, was a childhood favorite of mine. I think I really only saw it as a play, like one time at school.
Mm-hmm.
And like I would just see it pop up here and there, but like the story was burned into my mind and I just remembered it so fondly. Have you encountered this story before? Is this your first time seeing it?
I think the first time I came across the Snow Queen was probably Narnia. And like the White Witch.
Yeah.
And I don't really think I've come across this particular, like the actual story from Andersen before. So this is like my first time actually listening to the whole thing from start to finish with all 7 parts and not just an abridged version. I do remember like when Frozen became really popular, I do remember people talking about the Snow Queen and how it was a controversial figure, and they were trying to figure out how Elsa was going to be the Snow Queen, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it first came out, there was people being like, well, is she going to take children? Like, how is she going to play? Is it going to fit into this exact story, or is she just the figure of the Snow Queen, or like a winter witch kind of figure?
Yeah.
I will say I kind of wish Frozen did a little bit more with this kind of story.
Yeah.
I will say we are robbed of the crows.
Yes, absolutely.
We just finished hyping him up and then we find out that he's dead.
Yeah. They go out of our way to give us heartbreak.
Yep. They're like, here's this really, famous crow. Not famous, but like, here's this really like likable crow. He loves his sweetheart. He has eyes for no one else. He's helpful. He's willing to put himself at risk.
Yeah.
Crashes someone else's happily ever after, and then he died.
Yeah, it's a real tragedy. Yeah, it's just like there's so many fun elements that just kind of get overlooked, and there's just so much story here that is kind of amazing to me that Frozen didn't just take more of this. Though I will say, I think when I first kind of saw it and understood like the bits of it, I was at least felt happy. Like, okay, at least they're not going to do a straight up evil Snow Queen, because as we've established, I'm a big fan of her being either neutral or a good force. As my take on her, because even at the end here too, she's like, it kind of just feels like Kay is focusing in on the snow only because he's got the ice. And it's like, okay, you're kind of out of danger and you're not hurting other people here. Gerda's gonna come save you. You're gonna be fine. Just chill, literally.
I think you should just wait for her.
Just wait for true love, and you'll be fine. I won't even be around. I won't even stop her. I'm just got a job to do, and it'll be fine. So, at least for Frozen.
Do we know how much time has passed? Or is this like the metaphorical, when they come back, they're not children anymore?
So, from a literal standpoint, we do know that it was wintertime when Kay was taken. And we do know it was, at least from like the way they're describing it, it does seem like spring is when they're returning. Like, so it does seem, at least you can at least argue 1 full year has passed since like when they get reunited. But the fact that they talk about how they're full grown after that, it can also be seen as like maybe more time has passed than that. Because they do talk about they're no longer children, they're full grown adults. So it kind of depends on if you want to take a literal, like if you want to say an 18-year-old is an adult. They don't act like 17-year-olds, so I like at the beginning of the story, so I have a hard time thinking this would be 17-year-olds. The way I interpret this is that they are very much children when they start out, and maybe a year or 2 has passed between when Gerda finds him. But the way I interpret this is that they take a much longer time to return. So the return journey is longer for them, is my interpretation. So that several years go past there and they kind of grow up together. But that's just me. There's nothing there to back it up. Yeah. Because to me that makes sense, because like Gerda would have worked really hard really quickly to get back, but they never acknowledge their parents, so they don't seem concerned about getting back to them. So I imagine by the time they find each other, they're like, well, we'll get back home, but we got each other now, it's fine. And they're clearly adults. And it's also interesting because it's very easy to see that this is like a love story between the two of them, but it's also never explicitly stated as such. So you can also lean into both ways. Like, oh, this is a sibling bond, like, of just trying to take care of each other. But it's also very easy to see this is like a romantic, like, their true love type deal.
Okay.
So, yeah, up to you to decide how you want to interpret all of that. Regardless, just very cute. I do love a girl going out into the world trying to save her friend. Thank you so much, travelers, for listening. We'll be back next week with a different story.
And as always, if you want to see the show summary or notes, then check out our website, www.talesfromenchanted.forest.com. And if you do want to hear more from us, you can check us out on Bluesky, From Enchanted, or most other social media sites under our podcast name. However, if you are old school like Sparrow, you can always email us at talesfromenchantedforest@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your questions and suggestions as we plan our episodes out for the new year.
And remember, there's always a place for you in the Enchanted Forest.